Most people are reading plant leaves completely wrong. They see yellow and think disease, they see dark green and think healthy, they see an overwatered plant, and imagine it dying from too much water when a lot of the time the roots are dying because they cannot get enough oxygen. And once you start reading leaves that way, you keep treating the surface and missing the cause. A leaf is not just decoration, it is a report. Sometimes it is telling you the plant is defending itself. Sometimes it is telling you the roots are failing underground. Sometimes it is giving away the exact pest that has been feeding on it. And sometimes, honestly, it is telling you that part of the plant is already gone and no amount of trimming or wishful thinking is bringing that tissue back. So the goal here is simple. I want to help you stop reacting to leaf problems like random bad luck and start reading them like signals. Because once you understand what the plant is actually trying to survive, reduce, defend, or compensate for, the right move gets a whole lot clearer. Let's start with one of the most common things people panic over: brown tips. Brown tips are almost never a disease story. In most cases, the plant is losing water faster than the roots can pull it in. That stress shows up at the tip first, because those cells sit furthest away from the vascular system. They are the hardest places for water to reach when the plant is already falling behind. So when the tip dries out and turns brown, that is not the plant catching some mystery infection. That is the plant failing a water balance test at the outermost edge. And this is where people lose time. They cut the brown tip off, the plant looks cleaner for about 30 seconds, and then a week later, the new tip starts browning too. Of course it does. The original problem is still there. Dry indoor air, missed watering, a heating vent, a fan pushing dry air straight across the leaf surface. The tissue that already turned brown will not recover, and trimming it does nothing to change the conditions that caused it. Now stay with that idea, because it leads into something bigger. Not every ugly leaf is a sign that the plant is failing. A lot of the time, the plant is making a choice. Take yellow leaves low on the plant. If one or two older leaves near the bottom are slowly turning yellow while the rest of the plant still looks strong, that is often normal senescence. The plant is reclaiming nitrogen from its oldest, least efficient leaves and sending that nutrition upward to support newer growth. In plain language, the plant is retiring old tissue to keep the better performing parts moving. That is not a collapse. That is resource management. You can see how that changes the emotional tone right away. A gardener who thinks every yellow leaf means trouble lives in constant low-grade panic. A gardener who knows what normal senescence looks like can look at the bottom of the plant, see one old yellow leaf and leave it alone, but the direction still matters. If that yellowing starts climbing fast, if it spreads upward through the plant instead of staying low and gradual, then the story changes. At that point, you start thinking overwatering, root trouble, or a real nutrient deficiency, especially nitrogen. And that brings us to one of the biggest misunderstandings in plant care. A plant sitting in wet soil can behave like it is dying of thirst. When yellowing shows up all over the plant at once, the roots are usually involved. The most common cause is overwatering, but the damage is not as simple as too much water touched the roots. What actually happens is the soil stays wet long enough that the air spaces between soil particles fill with water. Root cells need oxygen. When that oxygen disappears, the roots start to suffocate. They lose function. They begin to die. And once the roots are damaged, the plant cannot move water and nutrients properly, even though the pot still feels heavy and wet. Chlorophyll production drops, and the leaves go yellow. That is why just add more water is such a destructive response when a plant looks weak in already wet soil. You are not helping a thirsty plant. You are pushing a compromised root system deeper into failure. And when it gets worse, the symptom becomes even more confusing, because the plant can start wilting while the soil is still wet. People see wilt and reach for the watering can again. But a plant with rotted roots cannot pull water upward no matter how much moisture is sitting around it. The pipeline is broken. That is the whole problem. If you ever unpot one of those plants, the roots tell on the whole situation. Healthy roots feel firm and look light. Rotting roots turn dark, mushy, sometimes foul-smelling. At that point, the real intervention is not more water. It is cutting away the destroyed roots, cleaning up what is still viable, and repotting into a fresh, well-draining mix so the remaining roots can breathe again. The draft mentions diluted hydrogen peroxide as part of that cleanup, and that fits here as a practical intervention, not a miracle one. The point is still the same. Fix the cause at the root zone, not at the leaf surface. Now, once you start thinking in terms of plant strategy, leaf curl starts making a lot more sense too. Leaves that curl inward, with the edges rolling toward the center, are often trying to reduce exposed surface area so less moisture escapes. The plant is pulling the leaf in on itself to slow water loss. You see this in underwatering, in brutal afternoon heat, in very dry air. Some tropical plants can look dramatic by the end of the day, then recover fast after a good watering, because the tissue was stressed, not dead. That is a defense response. It is not pretty, but it is intelligent. But leaf curl has direction, and direction matters. Downward curling is usually a different story. When the edges roll under toward the lower surface, excess nitrogen is a common cause. The plant pushes rapid, soft growth that the leaf structure cannot properly support, and the leaf starts to hook downward. Heat can also cause that shape in some species. The important part is the fix flips with the diagnosis. Upward or inward curl from water loss needs moisture correction. Downward curl from overfeeding needs restraint. Stop adding fertilizer. Flush the soil. Back off. Same general symptom family, opposite treatment. Light stress gets misread in the same way. When leaves turn pale, washed out, almost bleached with no particular spotting pattern, that is usually too much direct light. Chlorophyll is being destroyed faster than the plant can replace it. A plant that was happy in filtered light gets pushed into a hard south-facing window, or full outdoor sun, and suddenly those leaves look faded and weak. That is photobleaching. The damaged tissue does not turn deep green again. The fix is moving the plant into better light conditions, so the next leaves do not get cooked the same way. On the other end of the spectrum, extremely dark green leaves are not some gold medal for health. In underlit conditions, plants often produce extra chlorophyll to capture whatever light they can get. That deep, almost black-green look can be a compensation response to low light, not a sign of perfect vigor. The draft compares that mechanism to deep-sea algae, and honestly, that image is useful because you can feel what the plant is doing. It is trying to pull more value out of scarce light. The plant is still functional, but growth usually slows, leaves stay smaller, and the tissue often comes out softer and weaker than it should, and you see that same survival logic in sudden leaf drop too. Sometimes a plant drops green leaves with no yellowing first, and people read that like unexplained betrayal. But when a plant is moved, repotted, hit with a sharp temperature shift, or thrown into a lower light environment, dropping leaves is one of the fastest ways it can reduce demand on a stressed root system. Fewer leaves means less water loss, less metabolic demand, less pressure on a system that is already struggling to support the whole canopy. It is a sacrifice, but it is a strategic one. That same efficiency logic even shows up in variegated plants. When variegation starts reverting to solid green, the plant is not making an aesthetic mistake. White or cream sections contain less chlorophyll, which means less photosynthetic productivity. Under low light or stress, fully green growth simply performs better. It grows faster. It makes more energy. Over time, it can outcompete the variegated parts unless those reverted shoots are removed. Again, the plant is choosing function over appearance. So up to this point, a lot of what we have looked at falls into one bucket, the plant responding to internal stress. But some leaf problems are different. Some of them leave evidence. And once you learn to look for that evidence, diagnosis gets a lot less fuzzy. A speckled pattern of tiny pale or yellow-white dots across a leaf is one of the clearest examples. That stippling pattern usually points to spider mites. Each little dot is a cell that has been punctured and drained. And there's a test for this that I like because it turns diagnosis into something physical and obvious. Hold a sheet of white paper under the leaf and tap the leaf sharply. If mites are there, they fall onto the paper and start moving. You do not need a dramatic speech when a plant gives you proof like that. And one detail here matters more than most people realize. Spider mites are not insects. They are arachnids. That is why standard insecticides so often disappoint people. They are aiming at the wrong category of pest. Meanwhile, the mites keep living on the undersides of the leaves, reproducing fast, and once the population builds, you start seeing fine webbing too. At that stage, the plant is not giving subtle hints anymore. It is putting the infestation on display. Thrips leave a different kind of evidence. Instead of stippling, you get a silvery, bronze, sometimes pale gray sheen across the leaf surface. That look comes from cells that have been rasped open and emptied. The tissue reflects light differently because the cells are no longer intact and full. Thrips are tiny, fast, and hard to spot with the naked eye, but their feeding pattern is distinctive. And they matter because they do more than chew up the look of the leaf. They can spread through a collection quickly, and they can transmit plant viruses while feeding. So with thrips, early recognition saves you a lot of pain later. Then there is sticky residue on leaves, the kind that feels like someone misted the plant with syrup. That stickiness is usually honeydew, a sugar-rich waste product from sap-sucking pests like aphids, scale, mealybugs, and whiteflies. The plant did not make that mess for fun. Insects tapped into the phloem, kept drinking sugars, and excreted the excess. Then a second problem shows up behind it: sooty mold. A black fungus starts growing on that sugary coating and blocks light from the leaf surface. So when you see sticky leaves and black soot, the real target is not the soot first. It is the pest feeding above it. Remove the insects and the mold loses its food source. Chewing damage tells a cleaner story. If you see holes with intact edges and no haloing, no stippling, no fuzz, no sticky residue, you are usually looking at something that ate the tissue directly. Caterpillars, slugs, snails, flea beetles on seedlings. The edges matter here. Disease damage tends to discolor and degrade tissue. Chewing damage removes it. Slugs and snails often leave dried slime trails. Caterpillars like to hide on the undersides of leaves during the day. Again, the leaf gives you evidence if you know what kind of evidence to respect. Disease has its own visual language too. Dark brown or black spots with yellow halos are classic fungal territory. That yellow ring matters. It marks the transition between tissue that is already dying and the surrounding cells the plant is still trying to defend. That is a useful detail because it turns the symptom into a process instead of just a shape. You are seeing infection, yes, but you are also seeing the plant draw a boundary around it. And the spread usually tracks with moisture on the leaf surface, splashing water, poor airflow, wet leaves touching each other. So the biggest correction is often not the spray bottle people want to reach for first. It is changing watering habits and improving air movement. Water the base. Stop wetting the foliage. Remove the infected leaves so the spores have less to work with. Powdery mildew fools people because it looks dry. A white or gray powder on the leaf surface that rubs off feels like dust or residue, but it is fungal growth living right on the surface and pulling nutrients from the cells below. And one of the more useful corrections in the draft is this: powdery mildew does not need wet leaves the way people assume many fungi do. It thrives in dry-feeling conditions with high ambient humidity and poor environmental balance. So again, the correct response comes from understanding what the organism needs, not from treating the symptom like mystery powder. Baking soda solutions, neem oil, potassium bicarbonate, removing badly affected leaves, all of that makes sense once the diagnosis is right. Cold damage tells an even harsher truth. When leaf tissue turns soft, translucent, and water-soaked, the cells themselves have been damaged by chilling or freezing. Tropical houseplants pressed against a cold winter window do this. Outdoor plants hit by sudden frost do this. The water inside the cells expands or shocks the tissue, cell walls collapse, and the leaf takes on that mushy, glassy look. There's no clever recovery trick for tissue that has already ruptured. It eventually turns brown or black because it is dead. And yes, bacterial rot can look similar, but bacterial damage usually spreads faster and smells bad. That smell is part of the diagnostic evidence, too. So after all of that, here is the piece that actually makes you better at plant care. Stop asking only what the leaf looks like. Ask what the plant is doing or what happened to that tissue. Is the plant defending itself against water loss? Is it sacrificing older leaves to move nutrients somewhere more useful? Are the roots suffocating in wet soil? Is light destroying chlorophyll? Or is the plant overproducing chlorophyll because light is scarce? Did a pest leave physical proof behind? Did a fungus draw a visible boundary? Or is that section of tissue simply dead now? Because the fix starts there, not with cosmetic cleanup. Brown tips do not heal. Photo-bleached tissue does not turn green again. Fungal spots do not reverse. Cold ruptured cells do not reassemble themselves. And a plant with root rot does not recover because you kept the soil even wetter. Real plant care starts when you stop trying to erase the symptom and start removing the pressure that created it. That is the shift I want people to make. When you walk up to a plant and something looks off, do not rush to rescue the leaf. Read the signal first. Look for strategy. Look for evidence. Look for mechanism. The leaf is usually telling the truth. You just have to know which language it is using.